It's interesting. I think that Harvard Business Review was done back in 2018. Pandemics hit. So it'll be interesting to see what the figures and the stats are post then. Certainly in my field and my industry, we work with people that do connect with the value and do connect with the purpose. And more people are trying to find their purpose in the world. I mean, there's a million one coaches out there talking about how to find purpose. I think it's probably not accurate. I think it does it's a pause for thought. It's a pause for reflection. And I think there are a lot of people out there, the pandemic's hit pretty hard. They're going, well, what is my purpose in life? So I'd be interested to know what the stats are post COVID, but I suspect they might even be higher.
Mm. Is this a responsibility of the business? Because if I choose a certain vocation and I'm dissatisfied in that, and now I'm looking for meaning in the work, is that the business's responsibility, or is it the individual's responsibility?
Well, I think it's a two-way street, because if an employee finds meaning and value in their work, they'll be generally a high performer. Equally, so the employer has to be able to develop that and come up with what that looks like. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. You know, it comes down to even who are they working with, what are their teammates like, who's their manager, what are their supervisors like. So I think there's a responsibility on both ends to ensure that as employers, there is an element of purpose embedded in the work that you do or the services that you provide. But as an employee, you also have an obligation to figure out what it is that you want to do and what is your own value and what are your own thoughts and biases even that you bring into the workplace. And sometimes it's not a match made in heaven. And sometimes you have to make a choice to say, look, this isn't for me. I'm going to move on.
Mm-hmm. I was having a conversation with a gentleman on the podcast recently, and he said his career was all planned out for him by his family. And he was going to go to school, he was going to go to university, and he was going to become an engineer. But he had a passion for photography. And so he played the game of keeping the family happy, and he went every single day to the business, and the business showed up. They gave him a place to operate, they paid his wages, they took care of his security needs in the workplace, but he still couldn't find meaning and purpose because, one, he didn't choose to do the career for himself. He wanted to keep the family happy, but he always wanted to do something else. And for as much, in my opinion, for as much as the company could have helped him find that, it wouldn't have mattered what they were doing. They weren't a photography company. They were engineers.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's an artistic flair to that, right? Because engineering it's an art in itself, as is photography. So the connection's not that dissimilar. We hear a lot of people following in the footsteps of their parents and then later in life finding that actually I don't enjoy this. Maybe I did at the time, and as it comes on, I'm really not enjoying it. I'm not connecting with the why. And there is a lot of people who are soul searching and trying to find their fit in the world. It's a balance between expectations and then what you really deeply want to do. I think there's a lot of people that don't actually know that.
Mm.
And there is a journey of self-discovery about what it is that you want to do, abandoning potential disappointment of your family and your friends and, whoever it is that you're working for. I think as we mature and as we get older, I do think we do reflect on what we've done, how we got to where we got to, and, some people might term it a midlife crisis. I don't know. But, I think it's important to reflect on what value do you add and what mark are you going to leave on the world, or even so the people around you. What legacy are they going to be talking about?
Mm. I think the legacy component is incredibly important. If the average person's working around about 2,000 hours per year, you're going to be in your role 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and you can have an impact on people. You can have an impact on the community, you can have an impact on the business, and your career or your vocation can be part of that legacy. And that's where I believe we get a lot of our passion from. For me, I always wanted to be a doctor, but my brain didn't work that way and I didn't want to go to university. But I get to do things with people's brains, but in a different manner. So I get a lot of joy from what I do, and people message me, Daniel, made 100 grand. Daniel, just bought a second business. Daniel, I've just done this and this. And I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. And they go, thank you so much. And I say, don't thank me. You took the action. They said, you've got to take responsibility for this. You're my coach. And I said, well, that's nice and it's a badge of honor and thank you so much, but you did it. So for me, there's a lot of joy in what I do, but I'd done many things along the way that I wouldn't say had a significant impact. Yes, I was a nice person, but did I impact their lives? Probably not. We owned a pawnbroking business and there was no why in the business. There was no specific why. There was no passion. I didn't like it. My brother didn't like it. My mother didn't like it. My father didn't like it. But that generation was, you've got to work. You've got to pay for your house. You've got to pay for your kids. You've got to pay for your car. You've got to prepare yourself for retirement. And if you don't like it, toughen up.
Yeah. Look, I'm a parent of migrant. I'm a child of migrant parents. And
but when they get older, you become their parent.
Well, yeah, that's true. Always turns around the other way. And I'd be happily to do that. But when some people just don't have a choice about what they do, and I think that's the reality of life. And it's all well and good and well intentioned to say, what's your purpose, find your why, take the time to have a look at it. If you're not happy in your current job, leave. Well, who's going to put food on the table? Cost of living is going up. We all need to work extra hours or a couple of jobs to be able to put food on the table, which is not dissimilar to, say, what my parents did back in the day when they migrated to Australia. They worked long hours in shitty jobs that they did it. Why? To make a better future for myself and my brother. That's what they did. Some people don't have a choice. If you do have a choice, you're pretty lucky. And I guess what frustrates me in the space that I work in is I see a lot of those people who have had the choice, but then choose to not make a difference in the world. And for me, that's frustrating. And it doesn't mean that you've got to save 1 million people, but it's those little contributions that you make to make the world a better place, I think is really important. And whether that's finding value in your work or whether it's using work as a vehicle to then fulfill other aspects of your life that add value.
I was having a business meeting with a company in South Australia and they wanted to partner with me. And they said, Daniel, what's your why? And I really hated it because it was like a Simon Sinek meme. Begin with why. And they started the meeting with why. What's your purpose? And I said, well, I'm really good at what I do and it makes me really good money. And I feel good about what I do and I get reciprocated for it. And they looked at me and they said, well, Daniel, that's not a good enough why. Your why is not big enough. It's not good enough. I was like, well, fuck you. It's my why. You're not here to judge me. You asked me the question. If you don't like my answer, the problem's with you.
You, exactly.
And so they said, your why is not good enough. Now, I think a lot of people get caught up on that. Like, is the why going to be articulated in the way that everybody wants to hear it? Do we have our own why? And what I found was my why for a long time was finding a job where I could use my naturally occurring behaviours. I'm competitive. I'm great in sales. I like to talk to people. I'm extroverted. Coaching's great because I get to talk to people all day. I like to move fast and I like to change quick. And with coaching, I'm with my clients for 30 or 60 minutes at a time. And I don't really like to pay attention to a lot of detail, only the things that are important for me. So for me, yeah, people say, well, Daniel, how dare you say you're not attentive to detail? I said, I'm attentive to detail when it's important to me. Now, I've got 10,000 case studies into emotional intelligence. I can study if it's important to me, but if you ask me to have that skill in another role, I'm not going to produce that behaviour.
Yeah.
And I learned something which is called the science of job fit. And people can be motivated by utilising their naturally occurring behaviours in a job. They don't even need a why. It just aligns with their behavioural preferences. And when you put a person in a job and the job allows them to be aggressive, to chase, to win, to talk to people if that's what they want to do, to move fast and be inattentive to detail, they start to perform at their best. And the motivation starts to come from within, not
Correct.
from without.
That's the kicker. It is about what motivates you from within and aligning to a role, position, or a skill set that allows you to embody that in what you do. I think no organisation's perfect, no person is perfect, and we get lost in this world of perfection, and it adds so much pressure. And we talk about resilience and all that, and I just think I feel like over time, and certainly in my time dealing with people, the amount of pressure people put on themselves for perfection is astounding, and it's a negative impact on your ability to function as a human being. And we lose sometimes in that some of those finer skills and the art of communicating and connecting and finding your people, finding your crew. You know, it's about how do you value yourself enough to then add value to somebody else and do the work that you're engaged to do, whether it gives you that intrinsic satisfaction or not. If you don't have your baseline values, then really you're not going to fit anywhere.
I was performing a case study last night, and we use an instrument called Hartman Value Profiling. And it measures the brain's natural process of making a decision. And the person that I was working with was an accountant, and she had that perfectionistic trait in her, and it was her superpower. It was absolutely her superpower, because I think any business owner would agree when it comes to the numbers, you want perfection. If there's money leaking out the bucket, you want somebody to be such a perfectionist when it comes to telling the numbers that they'll catch every error. And that's what she did. Unfortunately, that skill of being a perfectionist and having unrealistic standards started to blur and blend over into her personal life, and then it impacted another part, which is called self-esteem. So having these unrealistic standards in business where everything's got to be perfect was great, but applied to her as an individual, it impacted her career growth. So she had been offered multiple promotions, but because her own perfectionistic standards applied to herself, never followed them through. And it was interesting that that same trait that she's rewarded for also stopped her from moving forward and created a lot of stress and created a lot of disengagement for her. And it was quite enlightening for her, is that she was actually very inattentive to it in her personal life, but very attentive to it in the career.
It's a lot of headspace to hold for someone though, right? Like being perfect in your personal life, being perfect in your career. Can you imagine the mental load that takes on someone? And, you know, it goes to show that if you're technically great at something, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily the leader in that something. And we see it all the time. People get promoted on their technical capability, or rather than necessarily on their ability to lead. And as you get higher up the chain, your span of control wanes. And you have to be able to have the skill set to let go and not have so much attention to detail. I say to my team, you know, 75% is good enough. And if it comes out that we've got 90%, fantastic. But we can fix, there's nothing that's not fixable. We can fix the other 25% or 20% that's outstanding. But if it means that somebody has your attention and you provided them with support and advice and guidance, and it's only at 75% because that's what you're capable of providing, that's okay. Because if you expect 100% all the time, you expect to not make any errors. So when you make an error, what does that do to you? How do you feel? We put so much pressure on ourselves unnecessarily, and we think, well, everybody else wants that. Well, actually they don't, because you know what? We're humans and we're all fallible. We all make mistakes. It's what you do afterwards that counts.
And some people think, what's the symptomology? What have I done the last couple of days to feel like this? But it's the roots. It's what's been bred into us from a very young age. I was driving with my family the other day and they're building a new school down the road. And with these big giant letters in English, it says, I am perfect. Now, in some sense, you're perfect the way you are. Yes, absolutely. But when you write, I am perfect on the side of the school, and kids are always thinking that they've got to get 100% every single time, the problems start to unfold. And from a very young age with my daughter, because of the case studies that I've seen in my business, is people believe that if they make a mistake, they're not lovable. So if I don't get 100% in my exam, I'm not going to receive unconditional love from my teacher, my family, my peers, and my brothers and sisters. So like you've got your 75% rule, I always say to my clients and my family, 80% perfect. And they go, 80% perfect. I said, 80% is good enough. And my daughter, who will be 11 next month, we set her goals. So we say, sweetheart, what do you want to achieve? She said, Dad, I want to get 100% in all of my exams. Sweetheart, this is how the world works. It's not going to happen. 90% is something very good to aim for. It doesn't mean that you can't get 100%, but you should aim for 90%. And we set the goal every day. It is now 28th of December, 2023, and my grades are above 90%. Now she comes home and her grades are 100%, and we celebrate success. She gets 95, we celebrate success. And the other day she come home, she said, Dad, I got 85. And I said, excellent. I said, how much does Dad love you? 100%.
Yeah.
And we've got to be able to instill that into our children and also into our team, because if you roll the dice at the casino and black comes up twice, you can be rich. If you're trading on the stock exchange and you get 51% of your trades right, you can become rich.
Yeah.
You don't have to have 100% every single time. And it's when we set those unrealistic expectations out from the start, it does impact our personal belief, because everybody knows it's not possible. Even an engineer knows I'm not going to get that bridge exactly how I want it. But commercially, you've got to get those trucks, you've got to get those trains across it, you've got to get the ships under it. And at the end of the day, it'll all balance out.
Yeah.
And that's tough. Today, there's a lot of job seekers out there who are saying that they're willing to take a pay cut for an opportunity to work remotely. What changes have taken place in the businesses and within people since COVID, and what's leading to this willingness to take a pay cut to work remotely?
Look, I think, there's two schools of thought. Some people think it's a privilege, and some people think it's a requirement. I probably sit somewhere in the middle in it, because it depends on the nature of your business. If you're in a corporate role, at a computer, working from home is pretty easy, right? Your ability to do that. You've got to have an element of trust within your team to get the work done, and you can put measures in place to be able to achieve that. The flip side to that is, I see a lot of teams not connecting enough, and it builds an us and them approach where, some people don't like working from home. I'm one of them. I don't like it. I'll do it on the odd occasion if I've got, the plumber coming or whatever, but I actually don't like it. I am a people person. I like to talk to people. I like to connect to people. I read body language. I read cues. In nature of my job is that. It actually made it quite hard to be able to talk to people and have their cameras off and not see their expressions or how their body moves when they're answering questions. So there's that aspect. And then you've got the other aspect where I was reading a study the other day where it said 90% of global companies employ 80% of our frontline staff who don't necessarily have the option to work remotely. So there's a disconnect between the haves and the have-nots. I think there are a lot of people that glamorize working from home, but what we're finding is the social connection is lacking, even though you can have your meetings online and your catch-ups and your, 4 o'clock coffee or 9 o'clock catch-up, I think what we are seeing, and certainly what I'm experiencing when I see people come into, is the mental health kicker of this is in most cases negatively impacted because it's isolation. We as humans are social beings. We like to connect. And remote working's fantastic if you've got a great team, there's an element of trust, and you do that connection really, really well. Realistically, not many people do it. So, will people take a pay cut to work remotely? I haven't seen that in my work. I totally understand that the research is such. I would think that, saving on commute, being able to get out in the morning, go for, exercise, go for a walk, take your dog, whatever it is, it's probably beneficial, and absolutely. But I think the flip side too is cost of living is pretty high. I really am not seeing anybody willing to take a pay cut at any point in time, and I get why. Things are tight for a lot of people. And then I look at, if we've got some opportunities to enable some of our frontline staff to have flexibility, not necessarily work remotely, have some sort of enablement for flexible working so they're engaged as well. And then you don't create an us and them workforce.
I work from home, and it's glamorous. I'm sitting here with my board shorts on and my Birkenstocks. And what I really enjoy about working from home is how I can allocate my time. I don't like to waste time. I hate to waste time, and my time is all I have on this planet. And so when I allocate my time working from home, I don't have the distractions. I don't have people walking in and out of the door. I looked at some numbers before. If everybody in America wasted 26 seconds every single day in the workplace, it'd cost the economy $120 million. The average person wastes 3 hours of their time on unproductive activities or low value activities, which cost the American economy upwards of $700 billion a year. And I think commercially. So I say to myself, well, I would rather have better sleep and better health and walk 10 metres from my bedroom to my office. Like, for me, that's really good. I can save time. I can walk the kids to school. I can start on time and finish on time. And if I'm working from 9 till 5 with no interruptions, and I spend at least 80% of my time on high value activities, I can produce 2 to 3 times the result of anybody else in my equivalent field. Because now they've got to travel to work. I went to Taipei to an event the other day. I left here at 10 o'clock in the morning, got there at 11:30, spoke to a few hundred people, totally exhausted for 3 days. Said to my wife, I don't want to do that again. So for me, I don't believe in the pay cut. My income went up working from home because I was being able to be more productive. But I'm self-employed. Different story. My team members, they all work from home, and I only want them to start at 9, and I want them to finish at 5, and I want them to take an hour break, and I want them to be fresh every day. I don't want to ask them to come back. I even feel guilty. The other day, I messaged one of my team, it was like 5:05 p.m, and I was feeling guilty, like, oh my gosh, I'm messaging them 5 minutes after work hours. Never done that before. But they're fresh, and I want them to have that experience. With the future of work, they're saying that 41% of HR professionals are contemplating changing careers. What's leading to this shift?
We are tired. COVID killed us. And I think, I was talking to someone about this the other day, and I said, we hold space for so many people.
Can you just define holding space? I've got my own interpretation of it. What is holding space?
Holding space is practical empathy, right? So people come to us and we identify with them, we understand and hear what they're saying, we try and actively meet their needs, essentially. So they come to us more often than not with problems. So with issues that they're having, whether it's at home, whether it's at work or otherwise, and we sit, we listen, we hear, and we'll provide support and advice where required. And I think some of the aspect where I say COVID killed a lot of HR professionals is that we had to put our own mental health aside to support those who were struggling with the impacts of COVID and lockdowns and the uncertainty that came with it. I certainly would go home or switch off my computer because we were in lockdown, and it would take me a good hour or two to just unwind, and I would be absolutely exhausted. Just that emotional toll that we have to reserve ourselves to be able to provide support to the others who at that time really needed somebody to support them and hold space for them. Not to fix the problem, but just to have somebody go, I hear you, get it. What can we do to fix it if it came to that? So there was a lot of pressure put on HR for, impacts of COVID and rules and, who's allowed to come in, who's not, do they wear a mask, do they need to be vaccinated? There were so many aspects that was out of our remit. But it's a bit like HR seems to be one of those areas where if we don't know where it fits, it goes to us. And I love what I do. I really enjoy it. And but I did find that time quite challenging for myself. And at the time too, I had kids at home who were home from school doing, homeschooling because the schools were closed. Like, it was a massive juggle, and you have this responsibility almost, or feel like you have this responsibility to not only be your best self in the workplace to provide support for the staff who are struggling, but also as a parent be at home to provide that assurance to your family that everything's going to be okay, when really you had no freaking idea. So there is a lot that over the years HR, I think, have tried to educate and support and, be embedded as part of the business, and some businesses do it really, really well, but it's a hard slog. Sometimes it's really pushing shit uphill.
I've heard businesses say we've turned into an emotional first aid station. And emotions, they are contagious. If somebody comes to you and they're depressed and they start to download and share the story and share the content with you, you take on the emotional weight. And for a lot of people who are in HR, also nurses and doctors, they suffer from what's called compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
They also suffer from survivor guilt. And so as people download this content, it fills their cup up with somebody else's story, somebody else's drama. Yes, they want to do that job, but it's incredibly heavy. And you have that compassion fatigue. And with HR, it's like coaching. There's only a certain amount that you can do for people. And when you say enough is enough, I can't help you anymore, you've got to take it from here, you do have a sense of guilt. And that little voice or that little angel or devil on one shoulder that continually says, you should have been more patient. You should have held more space. You should have done more for them. But you run out of resources. You run out of time. I can't give you all my time. I've got another 20 other people to deal with. I've given you all my resources. I've sent you for counselling, coaching. We're giving you time off. There's nothing else we can do. And that's heavy. And it's also survivor guilt as well, is that even in a business, if you're a top employee, you're doing a great job, or you're the business owner and you have to let somebody go, there's a lot of guilt involved in that. Business owners, leaders, managers can't sleep straight at night because of that survivor guilt. I'm okay. I've still got my paycheck. I got my job. But this person over here, my gosh, I had to let them go. I know their mortgage is due. I know their husband's out of work, and the guilt that comes with it.
Yep.
So I get it. I've been training a group of leaders, and it's online. And what I learned through COVID is that emotions are magnified and amplified through the internet. And when we talk business topics, it's very easy. It's very left brain. It's very logical. It's rational.
It's black and
But
white, generally.
black and white. Now we talk about self-esteem and self-worth as a leader, talking about courage and integrity, and the emotions start to flow. And I was training through till 10 o'clock last night with 75 business leaders, and it was all about emotional intelligence and self-esteem and self-worth. And this morning I woke up and I was paralyzed. My wife said, "You okay?" I said, "I'm absolutely emotionally exhausted from the training last night." And I was lucky that working from home, I didn't have to worry about my makeup till the first podcast. But, 10:30, I'm like, gee whiz, I better get the polo shirt on.
Yeah.
I better get cleaned up because I'm out of
It's
it.
exhausting. And we talk about resilience, right? It's such a fandangled word at the moment, and it's important. I got pulled up the other day about saying I'm not a fan of resilience because it looks at the past, right? It looks at traditionally push through, you tough it out, you grit and you bear it and you move on. I look at it and say, well, I'm a fan of the term resilience, or nimble resilience, I think is the phrase of the day. And I feel like as a society, and there's a generation that really haven't mastered the art of predictability and adaptability and proactivity. They haven't got the skills mastered as part of learning from their history, so there's the resilience part, to move forward and be able to not only predict but also measure how you react. And that's through doing. You can learn that, but we as a society have a lot to learn still, and have a lot to understand about emotions and how that plays out in the workplace. Because in order for you to be productive, you've got to be able to bring your whole self. That doesn't mean you sit there and you talk for 3 hours about all your issues that you're experiencing. But it is about, hey guys, I'm having a 30% day today. So, and yep, cool, no worries, we'll pick it up. And that's that team. And I think when you work from home, you miss that opportunity to have that connection. There's an energy that people bring with them when they talk. When you're working in a team, particularly a people-facing team, a frontline team, it makes it really hard to hide those emotions, right? So when you go home as a nurse or a doctor or HR or other frontline professional, ambulance drivers, oh man, the ability for them to unload is significant, and they're exhausted, and they may feel like you and get up in the morning and go, I can't move. But you know what? They have to be at work at 8 o'clock.
The A game, you can't bring it every day. And I remember at school there was people who peaked at different times. I remember those guys who were the rock stars in years 10 and 11, and they were burned out by 21, 22.
Yeah.
And, the sun might be shining every day, but there's cloud coverage. There's different seasons, and we talk a lot about seasons here in Taiwan. And we say that you're going to go through different seasons in your life. You're going to have a winter. And during that winter, your crops aren't going to grow, the ground's going to be frozen, and there's going to be no money to be made. And then eventually, the spring will come. But not every spring produces an equal crop. And so you've got to make sun whilst the hay shines, and you've got to do the best with what you've got. And my dad, who was a farmer, he would say, Daniel, if you have one good year in 7 as a farmer, you're going to be fine. You'll be fine. You're not going to die. You're not going to live, but you're not going to die. He said, but if you have 2 good years in 7, then you could set yourself up for life. And I love that approach because it puts things into perspective, that you're going to have a win and you might have many losses. Like every musical band, like I like Metallica and these bands like Korn that were around in the 80s and 90s, and they're still playing the same songs from the Black Album and the self-titled album 40 years later. And they have produced hundreds of other songs, but the market says, we don't like it.
These are the
And you
ones
can
that
play it,
winners. We're going to keep
but we're not.
playing.
Yeah, just play your classics and you'll be a billionaire. And even they try to go against the grain, and it doesn't work. Well, it's interesting, and I hope that people start to change their perspectives on frontline work, especially HR. You know, people are different, and people are complex, and people aren't ones and zeros. They behave differently under different conditions. And as a HR professional, you have to be able to keep that track record, not necessarily on paper, but you've got to carry that story of every person in your mind so that when you meet them, you remember the last interaction. And especially when holding space in an organisation, you've got to remember the stories and the emotional lives of 40, 50, 60 people. That's tough. For people who want to stay in the field and they say, you know what, maybe I'm on the cusp, maybe I'm one of the 41%. What's the future looking like? What hope is there for them in the future?
Oh, good question. I don't know. And I think that's one of the brilliant parts of being in HR is you deal with the unknown all the time. What we know is people are people, and generally people don't change. What do they want from you? They want to know that you care. They will remember how you made them feel, and they will remember the time you spent with them. And this is what I try and impart on all our leaders is if you show that you care, people will remember and value that. And we as HR are in a really privileged and unique position where we see the best and the worst and everything in between. But it's the best and the worst that really leave those impressions on you. And it's such a beautiful space to play in.